This incident happened to Sarah when she was 16 years old and living in Texas, USA. At that time, she was obsessed with horror stories, horror movies, and horror novels. She would often watch famous horror channels on YouTube. She never thought that something like what she read in the stories or watched in the movies would happen to her. Her story begins on a summer day when Sarah was home alone because her parents were at work, and she had nothing to do since she was on vacation. Most of the time, Sarah would invite her friends over to her house to hang out, and sometimes she would go out with them. But on the day the incident happened, she didn't leave the house because all her friends were either traveling or busy. Sarah didn't mind, as she decided to spend the day by herself. She turned on the air conditioning, sat on the couch with her phone, and after a while, she started feeling hungry. She decided to order delivery from outside, taking advantage of the fact that no one was home since her parents disliked delivery and fast food because of some things they read online about the dangers of fast food. But of course, Sarah didn't pay much attention to that and would seize any chance to order food from outside. After she placed the order, she opened the app to track the delivery, which was just leaving the restaurant. At this point, Sarah asked the driver to leave the food at the door because she had already paid for everything with her credit card. This was a common and normal request, as many people would ask the drivers to do that, and it was easy to verify when the driver marked the order as delivered on the app. Most of the time, the drivers would knock on the door and leave, or ring the doorbell to confirm the order had arrived, which was standard practice. After a while, Sarah received a notification from the app saying that the driver had picked up the order and was on the way. Later, she got another notification that the driver was nearing her street. Sarah began to prepare herself to get the food as soon as she received the notification that it had arrived. But unfortunately, what happened that day was different from any other day. After a while, Sarah heard the sound of a car door opening and closing. Then she heard the sound of footsteps approaching the door, but nothing happened afterward. Sarah started to get suspicious because she didn't hear the driver ringing the doorbell or knocking on the door, nor did she receive a message on the app. She got up from the couch and went to her room to look out the window. She saw that there was indeed a car in front of the house, so she knew the driver was still there. She opened the app again and saw that the driver hadn't sent anything. She looked out the window again and saw the driver standing in front of the door. He then took a few steps back, staring at the house's window. The man appeared tall, with disheveled hair, and his eyes looked frightening. Sarah quickly moved away from the window, and after a few seconds, she heard 3 knocks on the door. At that moment, fear and anxiety started to take over Sarah, who was standing in her room, not knowing what to do, too scared to move. Suddenly, the man began banging on the door with all his strength several times in a row. Sarah then said, "Please, just leave the food at the door and go." But after she finished speaking, the banging on the door continued, getting louder and more forceful. Sarah felt like the man was kicking the door rather than knocking with his hand because the noise was so strong. Quickly, Sarah ran to the balcony, and when she looked out, she saw that the man was indeed kicking the door, as if he wanted to break it down. Gathering her courage, Sarah shouted, "What are you doing? Didn't I tell you to leave the food at the door and go?" She was trying to appear strong and unafraid, but her hands were trembling with fear. The driver replied, "Open the door, Sarah. It's better for you, or else..." After the man said that, Sarah became even more terrified because it was clear that this man was crazy and up to no good. Sarah realized that the man intended to kill her because after he said that, he began kicking the door with all his strength until it couldn't withstand the force and broke open. Sarah ran towards the stairs, but she saw the man standing in front of the staircase, looking terrifying and menacing. His eyes were filled with anger as he stared at her. Without thinking much, Sarah quickly ran to the nearest room, which was her parents' bedroom. As soon as she entered, she locked the door securely and kept her eyes on the door, hearing the man breaking things in the apartment. After a while, everything went quiet. Sarah thought he had left because he had stolen what he wanted. But suddenly, she heard the doorknob move, and then she heard the man's voice from behind the door, saying calmly, "Open the door. Don't be afraid of me. I won't torture you. I'll kill you quickly without you feeling a thing." After he finished speaking, fear gripped Sarah, but she began to calm herself down. She opened the closet and found a baseball bat belonging to her father. She grabbed it quickly and stood behind the door, waiting for the man to enter. The man used a knife to unlock the door. Throughout all of this, Sarah was standing in place, terrified, but as soon as she saw him enter, she struck him on the head with all her strength. Blood started to pour out as the man screamed in pain, holding his head. Without wasting any time, Sarah quickly ran out of the room, dashed out of the door, and went to her neighbor's house, where she was able to call the police. After 5 minutes, the police arrived, but unfortunately, the man had escaped before they could catch him. They took a description of the man from Sarah because they suspected he was responsible for the series of murders of young girls that had been happening in the state. After Sarah's incident, an article appeared online saying that 3 girls had been killed by a delivery driver. From that day on, Sarah lived in constant fear and terror, especially since they still hadn't caught the man. Every day, there would be news on TV about another girl being killed. Because of her fear, Sarah no longer stayed home alone, and if she did, she would hold her father's licensed gun in her hand, ready to protect herself if someone came.